the situation is so bad, I'm not interested with it. Because if the money they pay me in a month, if it's almost, my transport the fare is taking half of it. So I'm not meeting up with it at all, with the transport fare.
The money I'm supposed to give my wife to buy food, I take and support the money and buy food. So I no gain now. So when I go bus stop and say I want to carry high price, they will still say it's my fault. But the money I keep one side, say this one I'll use them to eat. I take and top the food again.
Have you noticed that a rise in petrol prices in Nigeria often brings up discussions about the national minimum wage? During the last negotiations, President Bola Tinubu stated that the government could not meet the 250,000 Naira wage demand because it would lead to higher petrol prices. Consequently, the Labour Congress settled for 70,000 Naira, arguing that this amount would prevent fuel price increases. However, by October 2024, 2 petrol price hikes have prompted government workers to accuse the president of betrayal. How is the minimum wage set? How sustainable is it? Why is it so controversial? And how does it impact inflation and living standards?
We're grateful to say that at this point, we finally have an agreement to be jointly signed by the Trade Union Congress, the Nigerian Labour Congress, and the federal government.
Here's what you should know about Nigeria's minimum wage. In Nigeria, the national minimum wage is the legally mandated baseline salary for workers established by the government to ensure a basic standard of living. This wage serves as a safety net for essential expenses. However, throughout the country's history, it's been fraught with debate and controversy. Let's take a trip back in time. The national minimum wage originated in the pre-independence era when then Finance Minister Obafemi Awolowo introduced a minimum wage of 5 shillings and 6 pence in the Western region in October 1954. After independence, the Nigerian government ignored Awolowo's proposal for a national minimum wage under Prime Minister Abubakar Tafawa Balewa.
A state in the Western region, which has not been started in other places. Take the question of wages, for instance. We are the only region in the country paying 5 shillings and 6 pence minimum wage to workers. Whereas in the north here, it's only 2 shillings and 8 pence.
In 1981, Nigeria enacted its first national minimum wage law advocated by the Nigerian Labour Congress. President Shehu Shagari signed this landmark legislation establishing the minimum wage at 125 Naira per month for full-time workers, excluding seasonal employees and small businesses. Since then, Nigeria's minimum wage has gradually increased with notable milestones in 2000 when it rose to 5,500 Naira and in 2011 when President Goodluck Jonathan raised it to 18,000 Naira for public and private sector employees with at least 50 staff. A significant turning point was in 2019 when labor unions demanded a minimum wage of 30,000 Naira. The government offered 24,000 Naira while state governors proposed 20,000 Naira. The National Council of State had initially proposed 27,000 Naira, but governors countered with 22,500 Naira. The Nigerian Labour Congress, the NLC, persisted with their demand of 30,000 Naira. After intense negotiations, the government ultimately agreed, and President Muhammadu Buhari signed the National Minimum Wage Act, increasing the minimum wage to 30,000 Naira per month. In 2024, after a strike in which the unions initially demanded 250,000 Naira as minimum wage, the government agreed to the current minimum wage of 70,000 Naira.
Now, we need to understand the fact that this implementation, this increase was agreed on sometimes in July, and prior to this time, 30,000 has been paid. And even the previous amount that has been paid as minimum wage, some states have been complaining that they're even finding it very difficult to pay. You know, let alone this increase in the new one now being 70,000 Naira. So it's going to really impact negatively in no mean measure, especially for the states that they've been earning low.
Setting Nigeria's minimum wage is a complex process governed by the National Assembly and implemented by government agencies. Although the law requires a review every 5 years, this is frequently neglected, resulting in disputes and prolonged negotiations. In 2024, the minimum wage issue continued as the NLC made new demands and negotiations resumed. The government established a committee to assess the proposed 250,000 Naira minimum wage, but progress stalled until organized labor initiated a nationwide strike to pressure the government. Both sides held extreme or sustainable positions, with the government citing current fiscal constraints and the NLC pointing to the rising cost of living. A breakthrough occurred on June 3, 2024, when the Nigerian government announced its willingness to offer a wage higher than the previously proposed 60,000 Naira.
I think we should look at the differentials in the cost of living across different states, and also the differentials in the capacity to pay. We cannot compare the capacity to pay of the federal government with the capacity to pay of some state governments or of local governments.
On May 29, the Minister of State for Labor and Employment, Nkiruka Onyejocha, appealed to organized labor to be considerate and patriotic in their demands. A tripartite committee agreed to meet for 1 week to negotiate the new national minimum wage and resolved that no worker would face victimization for participating in the strike. Initially a regional initiative, the national minimum wage has evolved into a federally mandated policy requiring all government institutions to adhere to a uniform wage. This centralization seeks to standardize salaries and promote fairness. However, the intended benefits frequently fail as the required 5-year review is often neglected, forcing millions of workers to cope with rising living costs while their wages stagnate.
Honestly, with the cost of things right now, averagely, I think 100K is just fair.
Minimum salary that each one should be receiving should not be less than 150,000 naira.
Raising the minimum wage can be tricky, with potential consequences that have led to debate. Let's examine these arguments through the lens of the country's current socio-economic context.
We cannot go beyond 70,000, except if we increase minimum fuel pump price again. We know the pains and the agony that we are going through as a result of the first subsidy removal, which we are still battling with. So to now overstretch the battle and will not become an endless battle, so the leader have to retreat and say, okay, let's take what is available for now as Oliver Twist, and the take home now is that the year of review has been reduced from 5 to at least 3 years.
Publishing house The Cable reports frequent disagreements between the federal government, which sets the minimum wage, and state governments responsible for paying it. In 2019, some state governors expressed concerns about paying the proposed increase to 60,000 Naira while struggling to meet the 18,000 Naira then wage. Despite receiving additional funds from the Federation account and 5 billion Naira from the federal government, 14 states still have not complied. As the 2019 law mandated a 30,000 Naira minimum wage, some states opted to pay only partial salaries to workers. Negotiations to alter the minimum wage are often lengthy and complex. Labor unions push for raises due to living costs, while the government cites budget limitations. Laws exist to ensure adherence. Violations could lead to fines or jail time, yet enforcement is weak. As of October 2023, 15 Nigerian states had not met the 30,000 Naira minimum wage set in law under President Muhammadu Buhari. Yet, they faced no penalties for violating the law. Compared to Morocco, where the minimum wage is $350 or 525,000 Naira, and the Prime Minister earns $7,730, 22 times the minimum wage, Nigeria's income disparity is wide. Here, the minimum wage is about $43, while a senator earns 26 million naira. That's over 370 times more. The general sentiment is clear. If the government can afford inflated salaries and benefits, then it should provide a realistic minimum wage to offset living expenses, primarily driven by a hike in the price of petrol. A survey by the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics revealed that between 2011 and 2012, approximately 1.4 million fully employed or underemployed individuals lost their jobs following a rise in the minimum wage. Despite an increase in the labor force population, unemployment soared by 82.5%, reaching 7.3 million. A significant challenge is that Nigeria's minimum wage is not indexed to inflation. As inflation has consistently outpaced wage growth, workers' real purchasing power has eroded, leaving their incomes to buy less and less over time. Nigeria's inflation continues to rise, hitting 33.7% in April 2024, with food inflation around 40%. Due to severe currency devaluation, workers contended that the agreed minimum wage was unrealistic. So, organized labor initially requested over 400,000 naira. The government had said it could not meet these demands, yet the unions advocated for a benchmark that would ensure a fair wage for workers. Raising the minimum wage indiscriminately could have serious economic repercussions. Nairametrics reports that a significant increase may trigger a wage price spiral where higher wages boost consumer spending, leading to rising prices and inflation. A higher minimum wage would require the government to inject an additional 85 billion naira into the economy each month, resulting in increased borrowing or money printing, potentially causing demand pool inflation. Moreover, small and medium-sized enterprises might struggle with higher wage costs, leading to layoffs or closures and negatively impacting employment and productivity. Without corresponding increases in productivity, higher wages would not be sustainable, and the government would have to resort to inflationary measures to meet its recurrent expenditure.
If the private sector is increasing price, everything is increasing. It now comes to paying. You now say that you don't have money. So what have you been doing? What part of your cost is salaries and wages? It's part of cost. So if you are saying cost is what has driven prices, why is the cost not inclusive of cost of labor?
What is the difference between the minimum wage and a living wage? In Nigeria, workers grapple with the disparity between the legally mandated minimum wage and a living wage necessary for survival. While the government emphasizes the minimum wage, labor unions are increasingly advocating for a living wage. The minimum wage serves as a safety net, providing a basic income. Still, it often leads to disputes between the federal government, which sets it, and state governments, which must implement it. In contrast, the living wage represents the estimated amount required to cover essential needs such as food, housing, healthcare, and education. This figure varies based on location, family size, and lifestyle, and notably, the current minimum wage typically falls short of a living wage. This gap presents significant challenges. Negotiations for minimum wage increases tend to address economic realities, but often fail to meet the requirements for a decent standard of living. Recently, the House of Representatives called on the government to prioritize a living wage instead of merely maintaining the minimum wage, advocating for a shift towards establishing a realistic living wage for Nigerians, although no specific amount was proposed. One of the most effective ways to manage the inflationary impact of wage increases is by improving productivity, particularly in sectors like agriculture and manufacturing. These sectors form the backbone of Nigeria's economy and employ a significant portion of the workforce. By investing in technology infrastructure and training, Nigeria can enhance productivity, which in turn can stabilize prices and support sustainable wage growth. Higher productivity means more goods and services are produced efficiently, reducing pressure on prices.
People are not coming to the market to come and buy food items because everything have already cost. Everything have cost. Some people cannot avoid. Look at this fish now. It's before, how much are we selling it? We are selling it 700 naira, 800 naira. But now it's 1,005.
The fears of organized labor going for broke aren't unfounded, considering that they are already lamenting the government's continuous increases in the pump price of petrol. This became apparent after the Nigerian National Petroleum Company, the NNPC's retail management, adjusted the prices in its outlets from the previous 568 to 617 naira band to 855 to 897 naira. While the Nigerian masses were adjusting to the fallout of this pain at the pump, NNPC retail stations adjusted their prices again to 1,030 naira in Abuja and 998 naira per litre in Lagos in less than a month. These price adjustments, higher in other parts of the country, represent about 14.8% or a 133 naira rise. Meanwhile, independent oil marketers are selling petrol nationwide at an average price of 1,300 naira per litre.
So I've been here for 2 hours. I'm going to work, so there's no motor and there's no fuel, and I'm late from work. So they increased the price to 400 naira. So that's why I'm still here now.
The hope is that rising petrol prices will not push organized labor back into the protest trenches. In the words of the Labour Congress President Joe Ajaero, quote, "One of the reasons for accepting 70,000 naira as national minimum wage was the understanding that the pump price of PMS would not be increased, even as we knew that 70,000 was not sufficient," unquote. As the price of everything rises and significantly burdens Nigerians, the onus is on the government to ensure that the relief intended by the new minimum wage is not diminished. There should be no further delays in implementing the national minimum wage across all levels of government to enable long-suffering Nigerian workers to cope with the current hyperinflation, high food prices, and rising transportation costs. What the government has saved from removing petrol subsidies, which accrue to the federal and sub-national governments, should count for something.